Hey there, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 9th, 2017. Welcome back to another Dukes of Dice Daily. This is Sean from the Dukes of Dice podcast. And I hope everyone's week's turning out okay. We didn't have any dailies yesterday, we missed a couple last week too. But let's get back into the swing of things here. Just want to point out that yesterday, episode 142 of the podcast dropped. It's titled Tracks of the Trade. We reviewed Railroad Revolution from What's Your Game? So go ahead and check that out. I've got the links below so you can go find the podcast. This was Alex's first review since he's been back from his trip around the world. So pretty excited for this episode. I think a pretty decent review and lots of board game content. So definitely go check that out. Yeah, that sounds cool. So something else that we put out this last week was a live booster box opening. Here's an empty one for Star Wars Destiny. I can get this. Okay, there we go. Star Wars Destiny, Suzanne and I did an opening of a box each. And then I had one more box that Raquel, Mariah, and Chewy all helped me open. One night we put on Force Awakens and then they helped open packs. I had them competing with each other to see who could open more legendaries, but they tied it at 3 apiece. So I've got a bunch of the new set, Spirit of Rebellion. I may or may not have ordered some cards from Cool Stuff Inc. to fill out a couple things. Mostly commons and uncommons, believe it or not, although there were a couple rare and one or two legendary. But I digress. So what I wanted to do, and I don't know if there's any interest in this at all, but what I wanted to do was go through one of the two decks that I've built now that I've opened 2 boxes of Spirit of Rebellion, the new set. I've got 1 box of the previous set. And when I did the not Lord of the Rings, Legend of the Five Rings video a couple weeks back, it got a pretty good response. A lot of downloads. I think people were really interested in hearing some news about Legend of the Five Rings. And so I'm not sure what kind of interest there is out there in terms of Star Wars Destiny content. So I've done a live playthrough with Suzanne. Suzanne and I did a box opening, but I'm wondering if there's any interest in seeing, about deck building, or I should say deck and dice construction, or kind of tinkering with decks, things like that. And because it's certainly not something I'm going to do on the podcast. Alex is interested in that. It's not typically what our audience is interested in out there. And I'm wondering if there's any interest for it over here. So I want to take a look at one of my decks. But first, I just want to show off. These are these Ultra Pro pre-bound binders. And this is what I'm doing for storage right now for the cards. It doesn't help with the dice, but I've actually got 4 of these. So in Destiny, there are red cards, blue cards, yellow cards, and gray cards, and I've got them all organized in here that way. And then I also have, so like the front is all the heroes, the back is all the villain cards, and then the blue neutral cards are in the middle. And you can see there's plenty of blank spaces in here. So I've got some room to grow. I'm just curious, and if you're playing Destiny and you want to put in the comments below how you're storing stuff. I find that this is pretty good for doing deck building. The dice, though, I've got just this big organizer of dice. And so, yeah, I'm just curious what other people are doing out there for storage. I've seen a lot of things online. Nothing that I've done so far am I particularly crazy about, but just curious. So let me know down there. All right, so let's go over to a website called... it's swdestinydb.com, which is short for Star Wars Destiny Deck Builder. And you can go in, register, it's free, and you can build some decks. And what's cool when you're building these decks is you're able to kind of filter cards. So you could say, hey, I just want to see red event cards, or I just want to see blue and gray support cards. Lots of different filtering options. So this is one of the new decks that I've built. I scrapped my previous decks. I had a Django deck, and then I also had a Leia and Padme deck. I scrapped those. I kind of wanted to build from the ground up. One of the cards I opened was Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine, or Palpatine Galactic Emperor. And I said, you know what? I got to build this deck. He is expensive. So if you don't realize, you have 30 points to play with when it comes to deck construction for your characters. He costs 21 points for 1 die. And if you want to run 2 die, he's 28 points. Well, I don't have 2 dice. I don't have 2 Palpatines. So I'm going to run 1 along with a Royal Guardsman. And they have the Guardian keyword. They've got some good melee damage, some shields, which is a pretty solid card for 9 points. And so that works out perfectly, right? Palpatine's 21, Royal Guardman 9 points. You could have 1 dice of each. It's like they planned that or something. So Palpatine's really cool. He's got some good range damage. He's got some good disrupt by getting rid of getting rid of 2 cards at a time, some shields, some resources. But what's really neat is after you resolve his die, he's going to deal 2 damage to opponents' characters divided as they see fit. So that's more or less, unless that character die gets removed somehow, that's 2 damage a turn, which is pretty solid. And then he's putting out some serious damage on his own. So now let's just looking at the rest of the deck here, it shows you where you have your battlefield, and then kind of gives you a breakdown over on the right side of which kinds of cards you're using, how many of different symbols you have, your card costs, we called it the mana curve in Magic, and then what your rarity breakdown is. That's pretty cool. But we don't need that right now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so we can see what's in my deck. And so you can see over here, I've got 10 upgrades. Force Lightning, which is perfect for Palpatine. So here's my confession. I didn't own this card. I decided to purchase it from Cool Stuff. And I think it's like $30 or something. So yeah, I'm a bit of a degenerate, but not going crazy, not going too crazy. So it's got some range damage on it, some of which you have to buy. This is a really solid card. And then it has 2 different special sides, and its special is deal 1 damage to a character. You may remove a die showing a blank to re-roll this die instead of removing it from your pool. So you resolve this die. Normally, instead of removing it from the pool to the back to the card, you get to re-roll it. And it's removing a blank die of your choice. So it doesn't have to be your blank die. It could be an opponent's blank die. That's really cool. It's pretty expensive. And so, 4 resources is expensive. So I think having just the 1 is probably fine. Force Speed, I'm being told, is kind of the chase card of the new set. I only have the 1. I definitely would like a second because it's cheap. And it's basically just a free action a bunch of the time. I mean, it costs 0 to bring in, and you can take up to 2 additional actions with that die, with that special side. So it's basically just a free action. You're spending an action to get 2 actions, so you're netting an action. It's really good. It's basically, the card slot for an extra action when you can roll it. So I would definitely like to pick one of these up. I'm not going to go purchase it, but if I can arrange a trade or whatever, definitely interested in picking another Force Speed. Force Throw, another one that I actually had a couple of these because it's a starter card, and I have a couple different starters. But this is, I think, just a good one-off card, because keep in mind that all of these different abilities, which are a subtype of upgrade, my Royal Guard can't take. They can only go on Palpatine. So if Palpatine were to die, and I've a bunch of dead cards in hand, I can't use my Royal Guard. But it's a solid card. It's got some disruption. And then the special is to remove a die to deal a character damage equal to the value showing on that die. So maybe I've got this rolled. My opponent has a 3 range dice. Boom, I use that to deal the damage. That's pretty good. So a lot of this is using their dice against them, and I find that really cool. Immobilize, this first one I've got 2 of here. This is a rare, and blue character only. Remove this die to turn a die to a side showing a blank. But it's also got a bunch of shields. It's just a pretty decent utility card, and it's got some manipulation in it, so I like it. Need a lightsaber. Typically, I'm thinking I'm going to be putting this on my Royal Guard, which is kind of weird, but it's got modifiers to melee damage. A lightsaber is just a really solid card. I only have the 1 because it is kind of pricey. And that's been my experience. Anything 3 or more has been a little bit pricey. But again, I've only played this maybe 15 times, which sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of CCGs, LCGs, that's really not that much. Maybe closer to 20. But anyway, Lure of Power is another starter set card. Or no, I'm sorry, it's a rare. It's a rare. No, oh yeah, this just came out. What am I talking about? Lure of Power. Yeah, this card's awesome. So it's got a bunch of modifiers that are wild. It's wild modifiers. So you want to increase melee, you want to increase range, you want to increase discards, whatever. It's really cool. I really like this a lot. And it's not an ability, so I can even put this on a guardsman if I need to. Yeah, I think it's really good. It's just really versatile. Mind Probe. This is a starter card. This is expensive. Four resources. It's got it's kind of a well-rounded, may not be the right word, but it's got some damage on it. It's got some disrupt. It's got some discard, and it lets you deal an opponent's character 1 damage for each card in that opponent's hand. I think that could be really strong. Like if you really strong early on, they've got 4 cards in hand, 5 cards in hand early on in a turn. I mean, that's some pretty significant damage, but it is expensive, and I figure let's try it. All right, so let's kind of go through the rest of this pretty quickly. I do have 6 support. It binds all things, which is a nice cost reduction spell for playing blue upgrades. And I only had it's an uncommon. I only had 1, so I went ahead and buy another one. Meditate seems good. I think it's good. It's free. You exhaust the support and remove one of your dice showing a blank to turn one of your dice to a side not showing damage. So it gives you some manipulation of your stuff, whether it's discard, whether it's resources, or maybe turning one of those Lure of Power dice to the +3 modifier or whatever. I don't know. It could be good. Power of the Dark Side. So another starter card. And as an action, I can exhaust this to reroll one of my dice, and if it rolls a blank, it deals 2 unblockable damage to the character. And my understanding is that's not resolving the die, it just happens if I roll a blank. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, so finishing up with the events, I've got 14 events. Anger, play only if you have 2 or more dice showing blanks. Resolve an opponent's die showing damage as if it were your die. It's cheap, it's very situational, but I'm interested to see how that works. I have both block and dodge, which are my only neutral cards in this deck, and they prevent range damage, melee damage. I feel like they're auto-includes in a lot of decks, and I'm curious if other players think that as well. Spirit of Rebellion came out with some cards that are cheaper, that only let you remove one of those types of dice instead of all of them. And I'm just curious if these are just auto-includes in every deck for the seasoned Destiny players out there. Okay. Feel Your Anger. I've got 2 of these, and this lets you remove a certain number of dice equal to how many blanks an opponent has out there. A lot of control. High ground, you have to control the battlefield, and I've got 2 of these, yeah. It only costs 1, and then remove an opponent's die showing damage. Then if it's a character die, deal 1 damage to that character. That sounds pretty good. I've got some defense in here. I've only got the 2 characters, only have the 2 character dice, so I've got to kind of protect my guys. I just have the 1 No Mercy, and this lets me discard any number of blue cards from hand. I can then resolve one of my dice showing damage, increasing its value by 1 for each card you just discarded. That's pretty nuts. If I've got a 5-card hand, I play this, increasing something by 4, getting 6 damage, 7 damage out even, is pretty significant and could be a game winner depending. Okay, almost done. Overconfidence. This says spot a blue character to reroll 2 dice, then remove 1 of those dice with the lowest value. And again, this is something I can do to remove dice from my opponent. So a lot of control in here once again. And then finally, Rise Again, just 1 of these because it's pricey. Heal 5 damage from a unique blue character, say Emperor Palpatine, and then I can play an upgrade from my discard pile on it for free. So this is something late game, Palpatine's about to die, and sounds solid. So again, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of inexperienced in this. So what I'm curious for the Destiny players out there, number 1, what do you think of this build? This isn't necessarily designed to be a strong tournament deck. It's kind of designed to be casual competitive. That's the idea here. Is this a decent deck? Are there cards in here that you think are garbage? Are there certain auto-include cards in a mono blue deck that you think I should be including? Are there cards that I'm just not using that you think would go perfectly in this deck? Are there some quantity issues that I have? I've got a lot of singletons, a lot of just one-ofs. And that's one thing I'm struggling with here in deck construction is I'm used to building Magic decks. 60 cards, 4 copies each. And so there's just it's different when you only have 2 copies of a card. If you accidentally discard one of the 2 cards you need, you only have the 1 left. Whereas in Magic, it's like, oh, I still got 3 copies left. And I realize it's a smaller deck and you're seeing a lot more of your cards. I mean, in a lot of games, you're seeing almost all of your cards, it seems like. So I'm just curious, for any of those seasoned Destiny players out there, is this any good? Do you think that that I should start over? Do you think that you know, I'm just wasting my time here? And for those of you out there that are not playing Destiny, that have made it through to this point, was this interesting at all for you guys? Did this whet your appetite for Destiny, or is it, or not? I'm just curious because again, I don't know what kind of Destiny content I should be producing, if any at all, if there's any interest in that. So a lot of things that if you got some time, let me know in the comments below. I would really appreciate that. But that's going to do it. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you tomorrow night over at Empire. So until then, everyone have a good night.